Mel,
Yeah,
we have a major announcement to make.
go for it.
Did you know that right now all plans on Mint Mobile are what?
$15 a month.
Okay, that's truly ridiculous. Do you know how much regular cell phones are?
Yep.
$1 bazillion a month. 15 is less than that.
New customers get 3 months of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month if you sign up right now. And guess what? I use it. I love it. I've used it all over the country, all over the world, and it's great. And if you're wondering about phones, they have those available as well, or you can just port your own number and your current phone over to Mint Mobile. They make it so easy.
So if people are interested in trying out Mint Mobile, how can they go about doing that?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. And you know what's interesting? When my dad died, we actually put his phone on a Mint Mobile plan because it kept his number going, but it was $15 a month. So there you go. And there's different storage plans, but you might as well just get the unlimited because it's $15 a month.
Absolutely. All right, go try it today.
That's trymintmobile.com/WWDN.
I'm so excited about this interview because you need to know the backstory of how this came to be. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time in the country of Australia, there were two orphans, one from the US and one from Tasmania. And so they had to join in a union called Tazusa at Camp Widow. And that is where I met our guest that we're going to speak to today. And her name is Indira. Hello, Indira.
Hello, you two. Nice to see you again.
You too.
Do you ever go by Indy? Did I ask you this?
I don't remember if you did, but yes, all my family call me Indy.
Oh my gosh. Okay, because my daughter is named Indy. So
Oh, maybe you did mention that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like we would have talked about that. So that's I love that name.
Anita, can you explain more of the beginning?
Yes. So at Camp Widow, they usually have a meetup where they gather you in different configurations based on the type of loss you've had or, you know, your circumstances. And then at the end, they have you gather in geographic regions. So they have all the people from Western Australia. They have all the people they have a lot from Brisbane. So like Brisbane, they have people from just the different, are they provinces? What are they, states?
There are states. Brisbane is a city.
Yeah. Well, they just have a ton of people. So they just have Brisbane on its own because it's in Brisbane. Anyway, so they gather you together by geographic kind of groupings. And there was just one person from Tasmania all by her lonesome. And then there was just one person from the USA, which is not true. There was actually a few of us, but
I was there, but not there.
Yeah, you weren't at that session, but there was actually one other lady. But we were like the only people that were all by ourselves. So we got together because poor Indy would have been all by herself talking to herself about her own problems that she already knows about. So
We forged a great and enduring union.
it was one of my favorite parts. Indy, tell us where you're from and a little bit about that place. I already told them, but you tell us because you know more.
I'm actually originally from Melbourne, which is on the mainland. I grew up there, but I left as soon as I finished university, and have never lived there since. And for the last 10 years, I've been living in Tasmania, which is the southernmost state of Australia. And I live in Hobart, which is the capital, which is our southernmost city. Next stop, Antarctica kind of thing. It's a small city, 250,000 people, and it's incredibly beautiful. There's a large deep water harbour. Everyone knows about Sydney Harbour, but the harbour in Hobart is different, but also spectacular and large. But behind me is a big mountain. So I live between the mountain and this harbour, this ocean harbour, which creates some quite amazing weather patterns, but also surrounded by bush. So I regularly see wallabies and other little marsupial creatures when I go for my morning walk around the streets. I mean, I live in the suburbs, but yeah, it's very, very beautiful. I think it's paradise, actually.
Every time we talk to somebody from down under, I'm so jealous. And Anita, can we please move there?
I know, I'm like, I want to go to there. We have to go. We still have to make it to Perth and Tasmania, which are like the opposite ends of the country. But, whatever.
Yeah. Also completely different ecologically and culturally. Totally, totally different. Yeah.
This is required asking. I'm sure that
Mhm.
every person who's not from Tasmania asks you this. How many Tasmanian devils have you seen in the wild? Please say not zero.
I have seen, well, they're nocturnal,
Yeah.
so you don't really see them, but they're definitely around. There's a guy actually I know from Facebook who lives not very far from me, a bit closer. There's a nature reserve, like a 10-minute walk from my house, 15-minute walk. And so he lives closer on the edge of that. And he has a webcam set up in his backyard and he regularly posts footage of devils rummaging around his backyard. And so they're definitely around. Yeah, no question. And you can hear them.
You just call them devils. Like it's like Canadian bacon is just bacon and Tasmanian devils are just devils. Is that true?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about the
Tassie
actual
devils.
devil? What's the devil like in Catholic Church called? Nobody knows.
It's probably still the
The
devil.
holy devil?
Satan. I don't know. The beast.
Are devils dangerous? Will they bite your ankles? Are they like raccoons? Are they get in your garbage and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. Look, free food, right?
Yeah.
Everyone goes for free food. They're not going to attack, but if they bit you, you'd be in trouble. They have extremely strong jaws. So, well, the audience can't see, but I'm gripping my wrist fiercely
And not letting go.
and not letting go. Very sharp teeth. I mean, they're carnivorous. They're very fierce fighters with each other over food. So yeah, you don't really want to be bitten by one. You need to handle them carefully if you were to ever handle them.
Okay. I feel like we've gotten the required questions out of the way from the dumb
Okay,
Americans.
great.
Okay, Indira, tell us a little bit about yourself that does not have to do with just your wildlife and your culture. What do you do for a job? What do you like to do for fun?
Hmm. So for fun, I like to do a bunch of different stuff. I'm starting with fun, although work is also fun for me. But I like to bushwalk. I love being in the bush. Really, that's the main thing. And I do quite a lot of exercisey things, walking and working out in the gym. I like to dance. I mean, I just like in my living room as if no one's watching kind of dancing. I don't have any training or anything. And I really like being with my friends. Yeah, I have quite a simple life, really, in that side of things. Yeah, reading. I have a friend who tells me that I should be more of a human being and a lot less of a human doing. So in my mind, I like to be a human being, but I don't actually really accomplish that very often. But yeah, and so for work, so I'm a lawyer by training, and I work in the field of international human rights law. And for the last maybe 12 or 15 years, I've worked for myself, so as a consultant, and I do project-based work, mostly in the Pacific region, but some other places as well I've worked. And I do a lot of work on legal or sort of justice sector reform, so reform of the courts and police and so on, to improve people's, mostly women's, access to the justice system. So I could say a lot more about that. I also have that's what I do as a living, but I also work, I guess, on a pro bono basis, really, in the field of international criminal law. So I'm very interested in making sure that that branch of law takes account of women's experiences.
Wow.
So I have those kind of two related but different strands.
So, Indira, I know that you sent us some pictures that we're going to put up on our Instagram once this episode is live. And some of those are you in action, being a human doer, and they are in regard to your job. So, can you tell us a little bit about what specifics those elements of your job are like?
Yeah, so that photograph I sent you was from the Pacific Island country called Kiribati, which is in the far, for me, far eastern Pacific, actually not that far from Hawaii. And it's a tiny, tiny, tiny coral atoll country. in grave danger from rising seawaters due to climate change, actually. But very beautiful. And I went there with my colleague. We're doing a big project in 5 Pacific countries for UNICEF. And that was one of our 5 countries. So we've been there a couple of times now. And in that project, we're looking at improving access to justice for children. Specifically, UNICEF works, for those of your listeners who don't know, it's the UN agency responsible for children's welfare, children's rights. That's what that project is. And in that photo, we were having a workshop with all of the justice sector people who we've been meeting with over the last year and a half for our project. They were people from police and the prosecution's office and magistrates, as well as people who work with the justice system, like the faith-based groups. In the Pacific, the vast majority of people are very active practicing Christians of different denominations. So that's a really important part of their social fabric. So we had faith-based groups and other non-government organizations there, so women's groups and so on. And we were just having actually tremendous fun sharing the findings of our research with them and working out what we call a roadmap for action to sort of take steps to what next steps they were going to take in their individual agencies to improve children's access to justice. So yeah, so that was.
We could probably do a whole podcast on like the work that you've done, because it's probably really fascinating, and they could maybe make movies about that.
Maybe you should start your own podcast, actually, because that's a lot
really
of very important work. Yes. So how long have you been a lawyer?
Oh, I'm ancient, so a long time, yeah. I got my degree in 1990.
Yep, that was in the last century, so you're pretty
well and
early. Indira, do you want to tell us about your partner?
Yeah, sure. So my partner's name was Jan, and she was also an international lawyer. We met at an international law conference, actually. We were both living in Canberra, the nation's capital at the time, working in government as lawyers in government. We were together for nearly 30 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, so we had a very long,
yeah,
mostly happy relationship.
Talk about a power couple. Like, we are 2 fierce lawyers doing the lawyering and saving the world.
Well, I don't know about saving the world part, but
trying,
definitely trying. And we had an ordinary life, but we also had some extraordinary things that we did. We lived in lots of different parts of the world working. Well, we lived in Canberra, obviously, and we lived in Brussels and New York and London, all the big cities. It's probably why I retreated to Tasmania.
What are some things that you love about Jan?
She was the kindest person that I've ever met. She was conscientiously kind. And what I mean by that is that for her, it was a practice. So obviously she was naturally kind, but she really worked at it. You know, we all get irritated and have our unkind thoughts about others and what have you. And of course she did that too, but she just practiced kindness. So she would, if she was in a situation with someone who was behaving aggressively or whatever, badly, as we would say, she would sort of try and imagine what was happening for that person, like they were having troubles in their lives, and so that's why they were acting out badly, or I don't know, like that. So she really, that's what I mean by a practice. Like, it was a very conscientious thing. She was incredibly intelligent and an amazing reader. I have probably 1,000 or more books that she collected over her lifetime. And she read very deliberately, so she actually could tell you what it was that she'd read, whereas I could happily read a book, come back to it a year or 2 later and reread it and not even really realize that I'd read it once before until I was 3/4 of the way through, and I'd be, this is vaguely familiar.
That's me too.
So yeah, she was an introvert and very loving. She loved bushwalking.
Yeah. Is bushwalking the same as hiking?
Yes.
Okay. It sounds like so much more exotic when you call it bushwalking, you know? Like you're like hacking through the vines and stuff.
Do you still call it bushwalking if you're in the States? and you're hiking, or would you call it hiking if you're visiting a place where it's not called bushwalking?
Well,
Is
I think I
important.
sent you a photograph of me hiking in Colorado, or I don't know if I did or not, but I think I said hiking.
Yeah, I think you did too. So that's your answer, Mel.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question. You said that you were together for 30 years, and we know, I mean, we have our experience in the US, and maybe it's similar in Australia, that in the last 30 years, the acceptance of same-sex relationships has really changed. Is that true about your relationship when you first were partners? Was there any pushback towards that? Did you feel like that needed to be kept quiet at all, or was it always fine and everybody was accepting of it?
Hey guys, just checking in and want to say if you are enjoying this podcast,
And you want to see it keep going, maybe it's helped you through your widowhood journey and you think that it might help others on their widowhood journey, you can support that cause by joining our Patreon.
some of the things that you get as a Patreon beneficiary are ad-free episodes, so you don't have to hear ads like this.
You also get exclusive content, and at a certain level, you might also get an exclusive t-shirt you can only get that place.
That is true. It's pretty cool. There are 4 different tiers available, so check it out. It's patreon.com/WWDN.
And as an extra bonus, very often you get your names read by one of my kids, and they will do a terrible job with the pronunciation. And that's like a bonus, I think.
I think it's kind of the best. I would much rather hear somebody butcher my name than say it correctly.
A child butcher it than an adult do it correctly. Yep. So go to patreon.com/WWDN to keep our podcast going and support the widowed cause.
Yes! Thanks, guys! Back to our regularly scheduled program.
So in my immediate circle and my family, there are no issues at all. None ever. I mean, of course, in wider society, I think so yes, of course, it has changed here as well. So for instance, marriage, same-sex marriage was introduced here about, I don't know when, maybe 2000 and in the teens, I can't remember, maybe 2018 or 17 or something like that. Not that long ago. In the last 10 years, definitely less than. So yeah, so in the wider society, sure, yeah. I think as a person in a same-sex couple, people in a same-sex couple, we were pretty aware of being, I think we were constrained, like holding hands in public or what have you. But I personally have never experienced any homophobia or aggression or anything. But yes, it's definitely changed, of course. And we got married in Australia when they changed the law, which I was really glad about when she did become sick and was dying. Not that it probably would have made any difference, but I felt more comfortable asserting my rights, I guess, as her partner.
Yeah, that's so interesting because you're a lawyer and you're used to asserting your rights. But in your own situation, you're like, oh, I'm so glad that this is easier because it's hard, even if you have training to do that.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think about that often, that I'm, I've had a lot of education and privilege. And yes, it's my training is in the law, and I still find it hard to advocate for myself in certain circumstances. So I do think for other people who don't have any of those advantages, how on earth they manage, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what happened to Jan. What was she sick with, and when did that manifest?
About 3 years ago, she found a lump which she thought was in her breast, but turned out to be actually on her chest wall. So it was not breast cancer. It was some rare soft tissue cancer. She had that removed surgically. It was a very major surgery. And they wanted to do a lot of reconstruction so that if she needed radiation treatment in the future, because it was on the chest wall, you need flesh between you and radiation, I gather. She had that removed, and the surgeon was very confident that he got it all, and she ended up not requiring any radiation treatment or chemo. So we were like, great. But it took her, she because of the surgery, she lost the movement of her right arm and shoulder. So she spent a year doing very intensive physiotherapy so she could get that use of that back, which she did actually do. It was a very difficult time. She was on the 6-monthly scans, as they do, to see. And so at 6-month mark, she was fine, all clear. 12-month, we went back, and the main cancer treatment centre is in Melbourne. She could have been treated here, but we opted to go to Melbourne, where we have family, and it's just a much bigger facility, state of the art, much better. So, and we had the means to do that. So we chose to go there. So she was treated there. So we went to Melbourne for those scans. And at the 12-month mark, her doctor said, look, we haven't got all of the results back, but it all looks great. So you can go home to Tasmania and I'll call through the results. So he called through a couple of days later, and the result on the final test was not great. And she had masses in her chest cavity. We went back to Melbourne and they said that there was no further treatment. There was nothing they could do about that. They weren't going to offer her any treatment other than palliative chemotherapy when she started to have symptoms, because she didn't have any symptoms. I think on that trip we both got COVID. So we were sick with COVID. So I think that she probably did have symptoms, but it masked those symptoms. Anyway, they didn't really say how, they never do, right? How long have I got? But I guess we thought, everyone seemed to suggest, it would be a matter of some months. We got over COVID, but she just had this cough. And then one day, about 3 weeks after this whole schlemazel with the testing in Melbourne, she just really couldn't breathe. So we went to the emergency ward, where we sat for 7 hours before being seen, which was truly dreadful. And of course, like emergency wards all around the world, no doubt, it's full of people who are having mental health crises, and it's not a very nice place.
And this was
really
during COVID too?
It's after, well, in Tasmania, we had COVID, of course, but we didn't really have any lockdowns or anything.
Yeah.
We're an island. We just shut the borders, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's after COVID. This is after COVID,
Oh, okay.
after the main whole COVID thing. We're all vaccinated and whatever by now.
Okay.
They finally admit her, and basically she died 4 days later. I don't know. So I don't know. That's the short story. So I spent the 4 days with her in hospital, in the room with her. She was on a palliative ward, cancer ward. They were going to move her to palliative care, but the cancer just was moving so fast. So like every day they would do a scan, or maybe even twice a day at the beginning, and it was just racing through her system. So then it was in her organs, and it was obviously nothing to do, and she was too late for any kind of palliative treatment. Thankfully, she actually wasn't in any pain at all, which seems amazing, until the very last evening, and they gave her some morphine for the first time, and also to help ease her breathing, because she was struggling with her breathing. She had oxygen. The only intervention she had was oxygen. And then she slept into a coma that night and died about, 12 hours later. As many of your listeners would know, because, they've been with their loved one when they died, it's a phenomenally intimate thing. I feel incredibly lucky, actually, that we had that quiet time, just the two of us together, and she was lucid and totally lucid, and just herself, and not in any pain. So we didn't really talk that much. Yeah, we just were together. It feels like a sudden death in a way, even though she had that diagnosis 12 months earlier. But in the end, it was like a matter of 3 weeks, really, between finding the new masses and her dying.
It's so interesting because even people who have had a cancer death can have such a wide range of experiences. And yours sounds, I don't want to call it peaceful, because it's like death is not peaceful, but she wasn't in terrible pain and you're able to spend some time together. So that's nice, even though not nice because the circumstances were that she was dying. So
when she was admitted to hospital and it was clear she was going to die, I mean, I think we all thought, including the medical people, that she might have a week or 10 days, maybe not 4 days.
yeah.
But it was clear she's dying. So I just went into kind of like tiger partner mode. And I was like, I've got one job and I'm doing it, and I don't care about anything else. And that's to do whatever I can to make sure she has as peaceful a death as possible. And so that was my mantra, like just going over, and she did. She had a very peaceful death. I feel so grateful. I mean, just unbelievably grateful that she died like that. Sure, I wish she hadn't died, but if she's going to die, then that was quite a good way to go.
So then you enter into this new world of widowhood and all of that. And you've already been involved in a lot of things in life, with your work and all that stuff. What are some things that you encountered that just super threw you for a curve?
Oh my goodness.
Everything.
Yeah.
Pretty much, pretty much everything. I mean, I I kind of retreated. I have very good friends, and they were amazing. They left me alone, but they also didn't leave me alone. I don't know, I don't know, they were kind of very skillful about it all. I don't really know what their magic was, but what threw me for a loop? I mean, really everything. I think, and also at different phases, right? So in that first phase where you're just in complete shock, I really just trying to breathe. I don't have children, so I don't have that, that kind of drive that so many others have, that they have to get up and be functioning. I could, in fact, just lie in bed for days on end and read trashy novel after trashy novel, which is basically what I did for 12 months.
But we've also learned that you could have read the same book over and over and you wouldn't even have remembered it. So
Maybe it was.
and probably even worse with Widow Brain. She just had one book that she read for 12 months straight.
It was very efficient and economical.
You two did not have children, and I expect that there were maybe some assumptions, maybe from people that didn't know the situation. Or maybe they said, well, at least you didn't have kids, or maybe they didn't know if you were planning on having kids together. Sometimes that's a really sore subject, for us kidless widows or anybody who is not even a widow. What was your experience like?
I never got the question that you just said about kids. I mean, everybody in my world, I have a pretty small world really, and they all know that I don't have children. I guess what happens is that, I mean, anyone who has any grief, which is any adult really, knows that when you have a fresh grief, the old griefs resurface. So Jan and I had tried to get pregnant, and we were not successful, obviously, lost pregnancies. So those old griefs all came to the surface. And so now it's just one big sort of ugly, soupy, cryy mess. I think that issue about kids really, for me, came up at Camp Widow because, the vast, overwhelming majority of people there, who are mostly women, all have children. So their experience is so different from mine. And I found that in that context very isolating, and also brought up all the grief about not having had children, not being able to have had children. But in my world at home, it was kind of grief and relief, I guess, that I didn't have children, because the grief that I didn't have it, but relief that I didn't have to look after them and I could just look after myself, but also that they didn't have to go through losing a parent.
It's interesting that you mentioned that at Camp Widow, that's where it was brought up, because I think, when we're in those circumstances and you try to find people to connect with that have similar experience, it's true that most of them do have children. And I remember the first time that we were at Camp Widow in Australia, it wasn't until the very last day where we had another session where Anita and I were running it and kind of supervising it, and we were asking people what they thought. And one woman raised her hand and said, I think I don't really relate with a lot of the people here because I don't have kids. So maybe she said something to the effect like maybe she wasn't as valid in a way. And she said, well, maybe I can at least just come back next year to volunteer. And I was like, wait a minute, because I understand what that's like too, because, that's in our community here, it's very child oriented. And so I'm kind of the odd one out. And I'm used to that, even though it's not that fun. But yeah, it's also when you go to events, and it's pretty glaring because it's a really small percentage that are kidless that do go to those events. And so it was really interesting because I asked if anybody else in the session didn't have kids, and 10 people raised their hand. But it took the whole entire camp and then me asking that question at the end for people to find that there were other people like them. And it's really isolating. So even in an already isolating space, it's isolating for that. So when you returned home from Camp Widow, did you have to process any of that, or were you like, oh, I'm back in my safe zone, I'm fine?
Well, both really. If I'm honest, I think I might have already said this to you when we were there, but if I'm honest, I absolutely hated Camp Widow. I think it's an extraordinary thing, and I'm so happy that it goes on. And I actually sponsored someone to go this year, and I probably would do it again, although I may never go again. I do think it's an amazing thing, but for me, I found it so excruciatingly painful. I just was like, oh my God. And I wasn't expecting that. But I mean, the good thing about that for me is I was like, oh, okay, right. Why? Why is this so excruciating? What is going on? Okay, you have some issues, Indira, that you need to think through. And so actually, when I came back, I decided I had some counseling and I decided I'd have more. So I found myself someone. I've been talking to her about some of the things that came up for me at Camp Widow. So like I'm really grateful for that experience, that it sort of gave me a shove.
I'm curious if you think that how you felt about the Camp Widow experience and just widowhood without children would be different if it had been your choice not to have kids, because that's something that you wanted, you tried for, it didn't happen for you guys. So there's kind of grief from that. And maybe that would be different if it had been a choice of yours and it hadn't been something that you lost also.
Anita, I hear we have a store.
Oh, we sure do. We've actually had it for quite a while. It's called the Snarky Grief Shop, and it's where you will find all of our best grief merch. That is, yes, a little snarky. For instance, it's where you will find the official widow card that you can pull and use at your convenience.
You can put it in your wallet, and anytime you need to use it, pull it out, play the widow card.
Yeah, we have glow-in-the-dark stickers. We have shirts that say, "Be nice, my husband is dead." We also have the ones that are not quite as jarring, so that you can wear them out in public and not feel weird. But sometimes you need that shirt.
I wear my "Be nice, my husband is dead" to bed because I'm a little scared to go in public with it. But you've worn it on airplanes before with your kids.
Yeah, every time we go to the airport, I wear that shirt because I'm just like, listen, I got to get all these kids through security. Just be nice to me. Thank you so much. And it's worked for the most part.
Some of the less snarky grief shirts are podcast shirts or Widow Wives Club. We also have Resilient AF, right, Anita? What else do we got in there?
Yeah, which we're telling everybody who cares, like Mel's mom, that means American fork, because she can't know what it really means, guys.
Yeah.
Stickers and mugs and notebooks and just cool stuff that you can use to express your snarky grief. You'll find it by going to our website, shop.widowwedonow.com. There's a lot of W's in there, so just make sure that you've counted them and there's the right number.
We will link to that in the show notes, and it's also in our app, which you can get from the App Store. Can people get it from our regular website too?
Yes, if you go to widowwedonow.com, there's a link for the shop in there too.
Great. If you'd like to show your snark or have something a little more subtle, go ahead and check that out. Again, that's
shop.widowwedonow.com.
That's a very good question. I don't know that I can answer it though, because that's not my experience. So I don't know how I would react. And I think that it might be alienating without the overlay of grief of not having had kids. Just because every single presentation I went to, they're talking about their experiences with children in the picture.
If part of your job were advocating for widows that didn't have kids, and you were in front of people that put on events, what would you say to them? How would you advocate for us childless widows?
Do your lawyer job right now.
I think I would say that I think we need to have a little meeting or a little kind of survey or something to find out if people like us without kids are satisfied with what's on offer, or it's helpful, or what else. I mean, maybe like more targeted, seeking of views of people in our situation. I did give very detailed feedback. I mean, I know I've already said this, but I just want to reemphasize. I think Camp Widow is phenomenal, and I love First Light and the organisation that runs Camp Widow in Australia. It's an amazing thing. So I hope it can continue forever. But, there's always room for improvement.
Absolutely. And, just like with everything else, some things that are really healing for one person are not going to be really healing for another person. So you can have 99 people who really loved Camp Widow, and you can have one person who didn't. And it could have nothing to do with your status or your circumstances as a widow. It can just be a really personal thing as well. So it's not taking anything away from people who have had a lot of help from those, really social and kind of intense settings. So, everybody is a little bit different. So I think that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So after you've had this kind of earthquake in your own life, I'm wondering if it was hard to return to your job where you're trying to advocate for other people. Was it hard to do that? I mean, I think it would almost be really difficult because, geez, like you and yourself are not in a stable state, and the things you're dealing with are hard. It's not like somebody slipped and fell and broke their pinky. It's human rights. So how did that go?
Yeah, another really good question. I think, yes, it was extremely difficult to go back to work. A big part of that was widow brain. So this is also menopause brain. I have the two together, double whammy. This is an incredibly stressful thing to navigate when you're working. Like, I knew that I wasn't cognitively myself, like at all, but yet I'm expected to be like I've always been, and high functioning, highly productive, analytical, all those things that a lawyer would do, or many people do in their working life. But I knew that I was like, maybe I was really subpar, right? Like I was just 35% of the brain is functioning. It's just, so I found that an incredibly stressful thing. So actually I am still enrolled, or I'm doing a PhD. I don't know what do you call that in
PhD.
the US? Okay.
Unless it's something really tricky and we think
No,
it's
no,
something
it's PhD.
Okay.
And I was trying to go on with that. And I had just only a small amount of paid work, but I was trying to go on with my PhD, and I was just sitting in front of my computer for month after month after month, and actually really hating it. And I just couldn't do it. I literally didn't have the capacity. Anyway, I took leave from that. But in terms of the work, what happened was actually that I again, great, amazing fortune. I happened to work with my best friend. So she said to me, and I was not really doing any work. And she said to me after about a year or so, maybe less, 9 months, I'm going to put in a bid for this job. And do you want to do it with me? Like, do you want to put your name on the bid? And I'm like, sure, you can put my name on the bid, but, I'm not promising that I'm really going to do much. If you do get the bid, if we get it, if we're successful in the tender, then, but I'm not going to do much. And she's like, okay, that's fine. I just want to put your name there. It'll help with the bid, right? So we get it. This is this big UNICEF project I mentioned earlier. We do get that job, and I'm like, okay. She's like, we've got it, and I'm like, okay, great, but I've told you I'm not really going to do very much. She's like, that's fine, I'll do most of it, and I'll just bring you in every now and then. Of course, that's not how it worked out.
He tricked you.
She did actually totally trick me. And sort of like 9 months later, when we're in the thick of it, and it's huge, this project, huge amount of work. She's like, yeah, I just had to get you off the couch and out of the house, because it was just me and my little dog, and I was just at home all the time. And this project was lots of travel, and and I have to talk to her regularly. So I'm on the phone to her. She's in Canberra. So I think I would have stayed on the couch a lot longer. In terms of the question about the subject matter, to be honest, that's helpful, because it's good to be thinking about somebody else and their troubles. I think that's just I've always found that really helpful. It gets you out of your own head. I mean, I'm going to say something that's going to sound incredibly judgmental, and I really don't mean it to be, but any kind of trauma is really quite a self-centered thing, right? You're just totally focused or consumed by your trauma and the suffering. So I don't know, for me, it's actually helpful to think about somebody else's. I don't know, that probably sounds just super judgy, but
No, we've said the same thing. The nature of the beast is it's very self-centered. It's very, and I don't think we say that with judgment. Of course it is, because it just is what it is. Um, but I think it takes a little bit of time to look back on it and to be able to say, wow, yeah, it is very consuming is a good way of putting it. So I don't see that as, I mean, I do understand why some people would hear that and be offended by that, because especially when you're in the midst of that, it doesn't feel like you're being selfish. I'm using quotation marks, but by definition, it kind of is, because it's very consuming, like you said. So
yeah.
it's nice that you're able to get out of that. I find that sometimes too, but on the flip side of that, I also find that sometimes people try to coerce you into forgetting about your own problems. They say, "Oh, well, you just need to go out and you need to do something kind for somebody else." So there's always this balance between doing it of your own volition and finding value in that from yourself, and not just doing it because other people want you to do it or tell you that's going to solve your problems. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But going back to the fact that I work with my best friend, I
Hmm.
mean, like, she's an amazing friend. So our first trip for this project was only about 9 months after Jan had died. I was, yeah, a lot less functioning than I am now, to just over 2 years since she died now. And she said to me, like, one morning when we met for breakfast, early, it's a very, very full on trip. So you just start from breakfast and go till you go to bed, basically. And I'd had a bad night, and I'd obviously been crying. And she's like, I think, just you go, you don't have to come this morning. I'll do the meetings, whatever it was, go and do what you need to do. And then after that, for about the first 6 months of the thing, because also everybody who's listening knows about fatigue that comes with this grieving. Like, it slams into you. Um, and so she would also do that for me. She would say, like, at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, we might have two more meetings scheduled. She'd be like, you go back to the hotel and rest. I'll do these and you rest. Things like that. I didn't even ask her. She just could see it that I needed to.
Mm.
So she really cared for me. It's like she cared for me by helping me get off the couch in the first place, and then in the course of the project. So it's been a very healing, it's been a
Yeah.
very also consuming thing, because it has been. I mean, we've traveled huge amounts, and it's such a big thing. So, but she's taken care of me in that. So, I mean, yeah, I have that very lucky circumstance.
I don't mean to suggest that she coerced you into that. I mean more
No,
like
no, no.
society kind of tells us that the key is to not feel our own feelings or not deal with our own problems, but to turn outward and to try and solve other people's problems, I guess. And I think that your friends sound like they might not be humans. They might be elves or sorceresses, because they've been able to strike the balance between actually knowing what you need, and not just doing what they think will fix you so that they're more comfortable, not having to deal
Yeah,
with you as a sad person.
yeah, they absolutely, they're fairies and elves. It was the second death anniversary, Jan's second death anniversary in June. And around January, I started panicking about this. And but also just like really reflecting on what it means. Because 2 years is like, it's not a long time, but it's also a long time. Um,
Yeah.
and so I've started reflecting a lot on, well, okay, this is my reality now, and what do I want my life? How do I want to live my life? And I have to live my life, like, as in I am still alive. Um, because for the longest time I didn't really want to be alive. Not that I was suicidal, but just, what is this life? I don't want this life. I mean, that seems a pretty common
Yeah.
experience. But one of the things I was reflecting on was how I wanted to mark the second death anniversary. And my instinct was to just basically go to bed for a few days and hide under the covers. But then I thought, no, actually, I think I don't want to be on my own. I want my pillars, my supporting pillars with me. And that kind of morphed into lunch, and they were all going to bring something. I was like, nope. And in the end, I just decided that I would make them like a gourmet multi-course spread to thank them, because yes, they are fairies and elves and whatever magical beings who have just cared for me so well.
Please tell them that we called them that.
Yes.
I'm going to. They're going to love it, especially my best friend, colleague, person. She's going to insist I call her that all the time.
So as you continue to heal, what are your thoughts on repartnering? Is that something you'd like to do? You would not like to do? How's that for you?
Well, as a matter of fact, I have repartnered, I suppose. I'm in a new relationship. I started about 6 months ago. So part of that reflection process that I mentioned before, approaching the second anniversary and thinking about how I wanted to live, was that I didn't want to be on my own. I had no idea, like really no idea how anyone would go about finding someone.
What's the Tinder scene like in Hobart?
I wouldn't know.
Okay, so that wasn't the answer.
No, I think it was just like a really big moment to identify that was something that I would like. I had no idea if it would be possible. I mean, I was with Jan pretty much my whole adult, like she is my relationship experience, that's it pretty much. So I had absolutely no idea how you find someone or nothing, and nor any sense at all that it would be possible. But turns out it was. So I have a sister, and she was like, you've got to go on Tinder and Bumble and all these things. And I'm like, I just really don't think that's for me. I mean, yes, it's for lots of people. And she said, no, it's not going to be what you think it is. Lots of people are looking for relationships and not just hookups on those things. I'm like, yeah, but even so, you have a photograph and like 2 lines about whether they're like cats or dogs. Like, how could you even choose to go to a coffee with someone based on that information? Like, that's not enough for me, let alone anything else. Anyway, so that was never going to be the path for me. So yeah, I have embarked on a new relationship with a man, which to me is not at all surprising. But obviously for people who've only known me for the last 30 years, when I was with a woman, it's probably very surprising. I'm very happy, actually. Of course, there's a whole story about what goes on internally in my mind about the fact that I'm kind of in love with 2 people at the same time, one of whom is dead. Also, I only get to have this other nice new relationship because my person died. It's quite confusing, and it was quite distressing to start with all of that. Like, what does all that mean? But now I just mostly think that's just how it is.
What's his name?
His name is Rajan.
Rajan. Oh my gosh, that's like the coolest couple name situation. Where did you meet Rajan?
So Hobart I met him in Hobart, and it's a very small place. It's a small town. So pretty much if you have shared interests and shared values, you're going to have shared friends and your paths are going to cross. So I've actually known him for a long time. He knew Jan. He came to our house for various, gatherings and whatever. You see him at concerts. I don't know, just it's a small place. So I've known him for a long time. Oh, actually, I actually first met him because I'm on a committee to try, and that's lobbying, has been going for 10 years now, unsuccessfully so far, to lobby the government here to adopt a Human Rights Act. That's a whole nother story. Australia doesn't have any human rights protections in law, really, or very few. So unlike you guys with your constitution. He was on that committee as well. I think that's probably where I first met him. So obviously we had some shared interests, and so I don't know, we just hooked up, as they say.
We could use some more human rights here too, just FYI. So
I know.
When you're done, come on over and you can fix us too. You by yourself. You can do it.
On my own shoulders.
Yes.
That's why I work out, right?
Oh. Very, very nice. How does it work with this new man who knows that you were in this relationship for 30 years with another person? Is he pretty good about that? Does it throw him for a loop, or?
Now I'm going to sound like I'm in a new romance because I only have good things to say. No, he's totally fine. I mean, I have photographs of Jan and me all over my house, like everywhere. There's loads of them. And he's said to me recently, he really loves how her presence in the house. He's completely cool about it, actually. And he really liked her. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
It's always amazing to us that there are people that are such good humans and kind that leave space for that. Because it's such a big thing that's happened to us, you know? So thank you for all those great people. Oof.
Yeah. I do find it interesting though. I wonder, you're not the first person that we've interviewed who had a same-sex relationship and then a heterosexual relationship. Um, and I do kind of have to wonder to myself, like, is it different because there's not the feeling of direct competition, which doesn't make any sense because it's still competition, but I don't know, like you're not comparing him to her in the same ways. Like I kind of wonder about that sometimes. Like I wonder if it's easier or if it's harder to come into a relationship in that situation or if it doesn't matter. I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't thought about it like that. I mean, I suppose that's possible on some kind of subconscious level that that's there. I haven't thought about that.
It's probably best
Um,
if you don't.
um,
Don't waste your time.
I just feel like, I mean, I suppose for any new relationship, you're trying to get to know each other, and there are some things that don't make sense about the other person. I mean, I suppose, I'm learning huge amounts about relationships because after 30 years, you have such well-worn tracks in your relationship, and now everything is brand new and there aren't any of those tracks, but you kind of keep wanting to naturally fall into those tracks that you made with another person, but they're obviously not appropriate, or you haven't done them, you haven't forged those tracks with the new person. I don't know if that makes sense. So I yeah, I'm just like learning. I mean, so here's the thing. Jan's death has been the most amazing and terrible gift imaginable for me, because it's just forced me to reflect on absolutely everything. And I would never have done that, I don't think, not in that same deep kind of way, but for that kind of cataclysmic event. I don't know. I just don't think I would have. Why would I have? Right? Life was easy and we're just rolling along. And even though there are always issues in a relationship, basically it's working and it's just well worn. I don't know. But by dying and just, I guess, all that, just thinking about how that I have to now live a life that I had never expected, and I'm on my own and I've never been on my own. I don't know. It's kind of really forced me to grow in a way that yeah. So in that sense, it's like this amazing gift that I wish I'd never been given. You know what I mean? At the same
Yes,
time. So,
absolutely.
Yep.
so everyone knows. So yeah, so a lot of that is reflecting on relationships and my relationship with Jan, my relationship with other people in my life, and thinking about how I want to have a relationship with this new person, what I don't want to repeat.
Yeah. Have you ever considered doing any sort of human rights work associated with widows' causes? Like, because that's kind of a big thing in a lot of parts of the world.
Yeah, I haven't considered it like in serious detail or anything, but yeah, I have absolutely considered it. Yeah, it is a huge issue. Yeah.
We've done some interviews that have just been eye-opening, and you just go, "Oh my goodness, no! Like this can't still be happening." And apparently, it is still happening. So when you get done saving the children and the human rights, then do that.
I guess in sort of a way that I've never identified as widows, that it has come up in some of my work, because uh, a lot of people who are affected by war are women.
Hmm.
I mean, they're survivors and they're in refugee camps or wherever they live, and they are now on their own without male family members who might be dead or might be off fighting. Just they're separated and they can't, in some countries that means, like, if they're in their own home country still, like they can't If they're male, if they don't have any male family members, fathers or brothers or husbands, they can't be found. They don't have the right to inherit land. So they're just kind of therefore no opportunity to really look after themselves and their families financially, or they might have to leave their home place, as well as all the other things. There's so many legal rights, that women are denied.
Yeah. Well, you've got your work cut out for you.
Several lifetimes worth.
Okay. So after we've talked about human rights, we've talked about death, we've talked about miscarriages and repartnering, all of the really easy subjects. Mel has the next question for you that is on the same plane as those.
Totally on the same plane. What is your favorite cheese? And if you don't eat regular cheese, vegan cheese. And if not that, anything. Favorite marsupial.
Well, I definitely don't eat vegan cheese. And I tend not to eat marsupial either. Although I have eaten.
I don't think she meant to eat.
I know.
To eat or not to eat. I mean, you never know. Whatever.
Well, wallaby is actually a big thing here, wallaby meat, because it's considered more ethical in the Australian context. That's another story. I love cheese made with sheep's milk.
That's very Australian of you, I feel like. And aren't there tons of sheep down, like you guys? We know jackaroos and jillaroos who take care of the sheep. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just making that up.
Are there any particular names, or is it just all sheep's milk cheese?
Like as a category, that's my favorite. And then I like manchego from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Very delicious.
I also like goat's cheese, soft goat's cheeses, like chèvre.
Mm-hmm. Yum. I love it all. I feel like Indira is too serious for our nonsense, Mel. Like
I know, we're just silly.
Not in a bad way. Just like she's like, do you know what I'm saving the world, and you two baboons are asking me nonsense questions.
She's doing and we're being. We are being baboons. She's doing things to help make the world better and smarter. So it's all good.
I love silly. I really love silly.
That's good. Because here we are. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so glad that we finally made this happen, and that our union of Tazusa is still standing strong.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I hope to chat with you again in some format or other.
Yes,
over some sheep's cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're talking.
Not wallaby.
Not wallaby. No, sheep's cheese and a glass of Tasmanian Pinot Noir.
Okay. Twist our arms.
We'll come visit.
Yeah, we'll make a special trip. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you guys have enjoyed listening to Indira's story. If you want to keep the podcast going, check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/WWDN.
If you'd like to buy us tacos, go to buymeacoffee.com/widowwedonoww.
And we also appreciate a nice rating and review on Apple Podcast and Spotify. It really does help us with the algorithm. So thanks for that. Until we get to talk to you again, I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
I'm Indira.
And we are just two young widows and one widow who's saving the world one person at a time. We're all just trying to figure out widow.
We
do.
Now.
One of the questions we get asked the very most is, do you have a therapist you can recommend for me? And while we wish that we knew of therapists in every single place, in every single part of the country, we don't. So what do we tell them instead, Mel?
We say check out BetterHelp because it's online, it's at a reasonable price, and you can be matched with a therapist within 24 hours. I've also used them and they have been great. And if you don't like your therapist, guess what? Click, and get a new one.
Absolutely. It's so hard when you have an in-person therapist, if you're not clicking with them, to cut them off and get a new one. So that's not an issue with BetterHelp. So we always tell people to try BetterHelp. And if you use our promo code, which is
trybetterhelp.com/WWDN,
you get 10% off your first month.
Go ahead and try it out. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. And you know what? I'm a big fan of doing therapy where you don't have to wear pants, but nobody knows about it.
Are you wearing pants right now, Mel?
I'll see you later. Bye. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN.